The movie centers on Lady Malena. Malena is a local girl through and through. She was the most beautiful woman in town. The residents of the town felt a special bond to her, and all the women in town were green with jealousy. They admired her and wanted to emulate her success. Every man in town hoped he would be the one to woo her. Renato was the name of a young man who formerly lived there, someone who was much younger than Malena. Renato eventually buys a brand new bike. He now intends to brag about it to his pals. His pals claim to have overheard Malena saying that she plans to travel this route. Everyone wanted to emulate her style, so they assemble somewhere. The people present stare at Malena as she walks by. Renato keeps looking at her with a fixed gaze. He just stared at her helplessly. As soon as she walks by, he turns a blind eye to everything else and stares at her. She too is able to enter the city, but he never stops trying to catch her. Her father, a school teacher, was deaf. Malena grew up with him. These young people were his pupils. After that, we see them seated in a lecture hall, and they're causing irritation for Malena's dad by discussing her in front of him. Renato frequently checks in on Malena at her home, where he watches her through the peephole. Sad, she has laid down on the floor. The wartime departure of Malena's husband with the military is disclosed. He hasn't left yet. On the other side, some of Renato's pals show up, who were telling the fish story about Malena. She had once requested that I bring her a cigarette. The other locals shared the opinion that Malena is not a devout woman. In this case, it has been used to show how people in general feel about single women. Which of the claims made about her are false? On the other hand, Renato's developing feelings for Malena are revealed. Renato had begun to picture her in his mind after hearing that she was not a devout lady, or someone who was behind the times. Even though he was too young, he aspired to live like an old man, so he cuts his dad's pants off and wears them himself, because wearing short pants used to make him feel uncomfortable. His father went hostile for this act, and he was beaten several times. Renato continued to chase Malena like he was a small boy again. Through the peephole, he would frequently check in on Malena, and she knew nothing about it. Someone is keeping an eye on her. Malena's husband was killed in action, and the word of his death arrives one day. After hearing the news, her spirits immediately plummeted. She sobs helplessly as she lies in bed. It is revealed here that she loved her spouse very much. When she found out her husband was dead, she knew she had already lost the war. She now finds herself wondering how she will fill her time at her father's house. Renato used to work there. He overhears individuals using derogatory terms to describe Malena. He thinks, I am the only one who understands the truth of Malena. Unfortunately, I must disclose that she was not an impious woman, and that she did really love her husband. As he approaches her, he can't help but think about her as he looks at her through the window. Don't worry, he tells her. Let me assure you, I am on your side. Please give me some time to develop. He then attends a religious institution. Take care of Malena, he begs God. In return, I will always keep these candles burning brightly. The father of Malena receives a note one day. Malena has been linked to every male in this town, or so the rumor goes. Indeed, your daughter is not a devout woman. After reading it, he becomes enraged. He has disowned Malena and asked her to leave. Once again, Malena is abandoned. After learning that Malena is once again living on her own, he establishes a routine of watching over her. On one occasion, he visits Malena at her home and notices through a peephole that a police officer is there. There seemed to be some genuine connection between them. Renato is feeling bad because he saw it happen. In my mind, she was a really religious woman. I was also going to let it slip that she is a devout Christian. This was really hard for him to believe. The police officer eventually leaves her home. Renato ducks into a nearby alcove for cover. When the police officer exits, he runs into a doctor. He claims that Malena is involved with me. Exactly what did you do in there? This causes them to start fighting with one another. The cops are also on their way there immediately. The word about this has finally begun to circulate across town, that Malena is involved with a married man, and for that, she may be taken into custody. Malena has started to worry. To get some sort of assistance, she goes and gets herself a lawyer. The attorney successfully defends his client in court, proving that the doctor lied. The same attorney tries to woo Malena after he wins the case. Even Malena's defenses are useless. Renato saw it and now he's worried. Then it is revealed that Malena's father was killed in a plane crash during a flight he was on. To Malena, the knowledge of this is agony. Simply put, she had run out of people to win over. Malena was eligible to receive her late husband's pension after he died, since it was established that her husband had passed away. The situation at Malena's was worsening financially. She is a deep thinker, but she doesn't realize what to do. Therefore, the question remains. After a time, she takes out the scissors and begins to cut her hair. "Why shouldn't I be an impious lady if the sinful public holds me responsible?" she asks. Renato is upset by what he is witnessing, and he is constantly down on himself. He was no longer hungry. When Renato's father finds out what he desired, he agrees with him. The transformation of Malena into a lowlife is then revealed. Men from all across the town would frequently pay her a visit. The result was increased anger among men's female partners. They went to Malena after an outburst of anger. After beating her up, they send her packing. After then, it's revealed that Malena's spouse has come home. Someone had made up the story about him, yet he was still alive. When he gets back to his house, he can't seem to find Malena. Despite his best efforts, he has been unable to locate Malena, and they weren't the only ones living there. His inquiry concerns Malena. He heard that your wife had become an impure woman. She has since moved out. When he tries to tell his pals about it, they turn their backs on him. Which kind of man are you? They insult him. They slap him and knock him to the ground. As an observer, Renato feels bad about it. Now, he realizes, is when he must reveal Malena's true nature to the world. What happened to make him the lady who pays the least? Next, Renato sends him a note arguing that Malena is not religiously offensive. Instead, she has been forced to act this way. The rumors concerning her were disseminated by the townfolk. She used to wallow in despair whenever she heard it. He tells all of what transpired with her. How exactly did she end up banished? Malena's spouse reads it and becomes hostile, and he goes back for his wife. The couple then appears to return to the same town for their return walk. People in the town continued to stare at them. However, neither accusation nor irony could be seen in their expressions, since her husband was there to accompany her. If they speak badly of Malena, her husband may seek vengeance. Malena, her husband, and their admirers had begun receiving tributes from the locals. Then Renato is shown saying goodbye to Malena. Malena drops a few fruits, and Renato rushes to pick them up for her. To Malena he adds, "I will pray for you, that your future life may be spent blessedly." And in that vein, both parties part ways. Renato's final monologue can be seen here. He says, "Time passed, I fell in love with many girls. They always wanted to know if I would keep in mind who they were. In a word, yes. Nonetheless, she was the only one I never forgot and never will forget. Her name was Malena, and that's the end of the film.